Okay, so we're not going to co-stream it. Oh, excellent. Oh my God, Stacey, that's the
Nice.
best. But we are going to record. All right, let's start the webinar. Let's get this started.
I
Okay.
even have my spooky stories candle. Not that you could see it with the virtual background, but
Oh my gosh, people are coming. Welcome, people.
yay!
This is very exciting. Welcome. This is
What
going
is the
to
scent of a spooky stories candle?
Dry leaves, campfire, and cocoa.
That's awesome.
We are so excited to see so many people coming to this. We
Oh
know
my
that
gosh.
Long Islanders, I was saying to Jim, Long Islanders love talking about Long Island and how weird it is, and how much awesome lore we have. And this is going to be an amazing evening. Okay, I'm gonna get us started and just introduce myself and my coworker and give a little bit of a overview of how the evening is going to work. And then I'm going to turn it over to our guests because they are who you are here to see. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jessica. I am Syosset Public Library's Community Engagement Specialist, and I'm also a librarian. My librarian co-host is...
Hi, I'm Stacy. You guys can hear me, right? I'm not...
We can hear you.
Okay, good. I never know if I unmute myself. I'm a librarian at the Syosset Public Library, and my background is Sweet Hollow Road, nightmares.
And mine is just a regular campfire. So this program, we're calling it a virtual campfire because we're going to talk some scary stories that are Long Island centric. And our guests have great expertise in this topic. However, before we get going, just a few housekeeping rules. This event is in webinar mode, which means that only ourselves and our guests will be able to share our mics and screens. However, this does not mean we do not encourage audience participation. There is a chat feature and a Q&A feature in which you may either add some comments, questions, as long as they are kind and friendly. This is a fun, friendly event. Any semblance of abusive language, hate speech, racism, or anything of the sort will have you removed from the meeting at the discretion of our hosts, which is not why we're here. Long Island is super weird, and we cannot wait to hear the stories that our guests are going to tell. So really quickly, before I let James and Trevor introduce themselves, I believe the format for Q&A is they're going to go through a few points. They're going to stop for a few questions. And then after that, we're going to do that about twice, correct? And then at the end of the presentation, we'll do an open Q&A session. So sit back, enjoy, and I am very excited to introduce allow them to introduce themselves, James Chambers and Trevor Firetog. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you, Stacy. We're really excited to be here. And thank you for all of you who are in the audience coming to hear about weird Long Island. We hope this will be a lot of fun. My name is James Chambers. I am a lifelong Long Islander, and I am also an editor and an author, and I have written in a lot of genres: science fiction, fantasy, steampunk, pulp, and horror fiction. And I have written quite a few stories, scary stories about Long Island, which is one of the things that sparked my interest in Long Island urban legends and weird goings on. I am a Bram Stoker Award winner for a graphic novel I wrote called Kolchak the Night Stalker, The Forgotten Lore of Edgar Allan Poe. It was based on the old TV show starring Darren McGavin. And I have some short story collections out, including one called On the Night Border, which is a collection of my horror stories, and a collection of my science fiction and fantasy stories coming this fall called On the Hierophant Road. Most recently, I published a novella called Devil in the Green, which is about the Montauk Monster and the Montauk Project and all sorts of cool weirdness on Long Island. And I edited an anthology called Under Twin Suns, Alternate Histories of the Yellow Sign, which are stories inspired by the writings of Robert W. Chambers, who wrote in the late mid 1890s a book called The King in Yellow. And it's about a mysterious play that drives you mad if you read the whole thing. And the authors for that anthology, which includes Trevor, my co-host tonight, all wrote stories based on the yellow sign, the King in Yellow, the mythos. So Trevor, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. My name is Trevor Firetog. Like Jim, I am also a lifelong Long Islander. I spent a lot of time, growing up around Amityville Horror, Sweet Hollow Road, all those wonderful sites. And I have a novella out called Usual Monsters. And I was also published in another anthology that was edited by Jim called A New York State of Fright, which is horror stories set in New York by New York authors. And that's kind of where I fell in love with writing about New York.
Excellent. All right, so I think without further ado, I'm going to bring our presentation up on screen. And there we go. And here's this wonderful graphic from Jessica. And you'll notice a couple of things. I just want to give a quick shout out to the Horror Writers Association and the Summer Scares program. Trevor and I are both members of the Horror Writers Association, and we're active in the local chapter. So if you're listening to this tonight and you're interested in writing horror stories or other dark fiction, feel free to look us up or get in touch. The HWA's website is horror.org. And the Summer Scares program is part of librarian outreach that the HWA does. And Jessica has been a huge supporter of that. Thank you for that, Jessica. We're always great to see people reading. We're always happy to see them reading horror in particular.
So are we.
All right. So without further ado, I think I've said that twice now, so that's probably too much ado. We'll get into things. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about Long Island myths and legends in the style of a virtual campfire discussion. And this picture here, we won't be talking about this location tonight, but it's one of my favorite abandoned areas on Long Island to go hiking and take photographs. This is from Kings Park Psychiatric Center, which is currently Nissaquag State Park up on the North Shore. But before we jump into what's weird on Long Island, I thought we should take a little time just to talk about what is an urban legend. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase urban legend. We have an idea of what they are. They're myths, they're stories, local lore, folklore, things like that. And Trevor and I put together this definition of an urban legend, which is a strange, lurid, or outlandish tale spread by rumor and hearsay with no ascertainable factual basis, often reported at a third hand or further remove, meaning you're hearing it third hand, fourth hand, fifth hand in the chain of communication. And they frequently have cautionary aspects like the original Grimm's fairy tales. Not always, but frequently. But they all tend to be weird. They tend to be frightening. They tend to be a little off kilter. And the big key is that you usually hear an urban legend from somebody who's saying, something like, my cousin's neighbor's aunt had this happen to her. And so it's so far removed that you can't really reach out and confirm it. And yet these tales spread far and wide, and they persist over time. So what are some classic urban legends? These are 4 that we settled on just as sort of examples of what an urban legend is. The vanishing hitchhiker. This is a famous one. There are variations of this literally all over the world. It's the lone, seemingly lost woman on the road who's looking for help and needs a ride. The motorist encounters her, stops to help out. The woman gets in the car, perhaps acts a little strange or disoriented, and gives an address where she would like to be dropped off. The helpful motorist takes her there, only to find out that the address is a cemetery. And when they turn around to ask the woman if this is the right place, she's gone, vanished from the car. Or a variation on that is they take her to a house and she disappears, and they go back the next day to check on her, only to find out that she did indeed live there, but she also died a year ago or 3 years ago or something like that.
And then we also have other urban legends like the Hook Hand Killer, which is kind of that quintessential story we all hear of a couple that are parked in an isolated remote part, and they hear something on the radio that a psychotic killer just escaped. And he says, oh, don't worry about it. But they hear scratching on the car. And he says, don't worry, it's just a tree branch. But then later on, when they get out of the car, they find a hook on the windshield or on the window.
The close escape.
Yeah.
Another one we like is alligators in the sewers. And this one goes back quite a ways and stems from, I guess, a point in the past, and I don't know if you can still do this, but when baby alligators were sold as pets at roadside attractions, typically reported to be in Florida or the South somewhere, and people would buy them and bring them home back to the city from vacation, pets for their kids, until they quickly realized that, gee, these alligators are going to get big and they're going to want to eat stuff, possibly us. And so the parents, while the kids were out at school or out playing, flush it away down the toilet. But the plucky alligator baby survives its sewer travel and takes up residence under the city streets, leading to alligator sightings in the sewer and great danger, perhaps, for underground workers.
And then, of course, Bloody Mary. Who hasn't tried to play that once at a sleepover or anything like that? If you say her name into a mirror, either 3 or 5 times, light a candle, then she'll appear. And what does she do when she appears? James.
She gets you.
Yes, that's it. She gets you.
We don't really know what she wants to do with you once she gets you, but she gets you.
Yeah.
But there are variations of the Bloody Mary legend all over the country, perhaps all over the world, and it's even part of the inspiration for movies like Candyman, if anyone has seen that, where a similar activity summons a different type of ghost. But these are classic urban legends, and one of the things about urban legends is that they like to keep up with the times. And so we have some modern urban legends. And these are pretty creepy and pretty weird, or just plain annoying in the case of E-chain letters. But some of them come and go, like mysterious clowns. You never quite know where the mysterious clowns are going to pop up. Then, okay, that's enough with the mysterious clowns. Okay, now that's enough with the mysterious clowns. All right, thank you, Tim Curry. There we go. But mysterious clowns have sort of come and gone in fashion. I remember hearing weird rumors about clowns in vans roaming the streets to kidnap children when I was younger. And for a while you didn't hear about them, and then they came sort of surging back, and mysterious clowns started appearing everywhere. And people were getting pictures of them. And so you would find them on the internet, documentation of clowns hiding in weird places in the woods, in lonely parts of the city, just walking along. And who knows how much of that can be attributed to the popularity of Stephen King's story, It, and its famous clown Pennywise.
And then you also have like E-chain letters, which I remember back in the Wild West days of the internet. You'd get these letters saying you need to forward this to 10 people, or a little girl will appear by your bed and kill you, or even a clown will appear by your bed and kill you. But if you do forward it to 10 people, the love of your life will admit they have a crush on you, or maybe you'll get a free iPad or something of that sort.
Or Bill Gates will send you to Disneyland.
Bill Gates will send you to Disneyland, yes.
And another popular YouTube urban legend is the Momo Challenge. And this is a weird one. The Momo Challenge is about this character, Momo, as you can see here in the picture, who is a very sort of distorted face and supposed to have a bird-like body. And Momo would pop up in children's videos on YouTube and seemingly charm the children and challenge them to do dangerous things, hurt themselves, possibly even encourage them to commit suicide. The origins of the Momo challenge seem to be somewhere in Japan, which is interesting because you think about that, how quickly it spread internationally because of the internet, and how living in a wired world has changed the nature of urban legends and our familiarity with them.
And speaking of urban legends that kind of spread like wildfire, we have here Slender Man, which by all reports kind of started out as a story on a website called Creepypasta, and it concerns a figure who is incredibly tall, incredibly skinny, a pale face, and he appears in random locations to snatch children away.
And I think somebody in the chat mentioned creepypasta, which is perhaps the origin of the Slender Man legend. I know he's a popular figure in online forums and creepypastas, and there were a lot of photographs, supposedly historical images of the Slender Man as he appeared in the past. So fascinating character. All right, so we've looked at some classic urban legends and some modern urban legends and gotten a great sense of what urban legends are all about, what sort of makes an urban legend. And now it's time for us to talk about the local scary stuff. So we're going to look at a selection of Long Island urban legends and myths that Trevor and I have researched and are here to share with you tonight. We're hoping that we'll hear from our audience about their own experiences with urban legends or weird phenomena on Long Island. And as Jessica said earlier on, after each major segment, we'll take just one or two questions on that particular topic before we move on. And then at the end, we'll come back for general questions on anything that we've covered or anything else people would like to talk about. All right, so to start us off, the famous Sweet Hollow Road in Melville, site of ghosts, hauntings, and even a woman in white. So there are three major urban legends associated with Sweet Hollow Road. There are more than three altogether, but we're just going to look at three of the most commonly reported ones or repeated ones. Child ghosts from a tragic school bus crash, a woman in white, who maybe is a variation on the vanishing hitchhiker urban myth, and the bridge suicides. So the Northern State Parkway overpass at Sweet Hollow Road is supposedly the site of a tragic school bus crash. Many years ago, a bus driving across the bridge over Sweet Hollow Road in a snowstorm lost control, swerved over the side, and crashed to the road below. The driver and all the children died. But it's said that their ghosts still haunt the location today, and that if you park your car beneath the bridge at night, turn off the engine and lights, and put the car in neutral, the ghosts of the children will push your car clear of the bridge and out of danger of the falling bus. But is it really ghosts responsible for that? Or could it be simply a slight grade in the road and gravity doing its work? And also, how often do school buses really go on the Northern State Parkway? So there are a lot of questions about this myth, but it's the most popular one. And it's the one that I've encountered the most people who have actually gone out to Sweet Hollow Road and tried. They've pulled under the bridge, parked their car, turned off the lights, and waited for the ghosts to move them. I do not recommend this. Sweet Hollow Road is a fairly narrow 2-lane road. It's windy, it's dark. And as I learned when I went to take some photographs for this presentation, people really zip along that road. So parking your car in the dark and turning all the lights off may not be the smartest idea. But people still try it. And I know that I have met some people who said, yeah, their car moved. All right, our next tale from Sweet Hollow Road is the woman in white. This one does seem like a variation on the vanishing hitchhiker. It's a woman in white on the side of the road. Motorists see her as they're approaching, but then she throws herself in front of the oncoming car. She's not looking for a ride. She's looking for something else. We don't know what. But when the motorists swerve, skid, come braking to a sudden stop and get out to check on the pedestrian they're afraid they hit, they find no one there. She's gone. Although sometimes they might hear a faint sobbing in the woods. So is this sort of a version of the vanishing hitchhiker, or is it a restless spirit wandering from the Melville Cemetery, which is right on Sweet Hollow Road? We don't know. We really know very little about this particular ghostly figure, but it's certainly one that has come up more than a few times on that stretch of highway. And our third incident on Sweet Hollow Road, we return to the overpass for rumors of ghosts of teens who hung themselves from that bridge. It's a tragic sort of inspiration for an urban legend, and I have never found any story to explain why the teens did that. And sometimes it's one teen and sometimes it's three teens. But we don't know why they hung themselves. But they're said to sometimes reappear there. They're ghosts hanging from the bridge, a grisly reminder of their tragic end. And one particular version of this legend, recorded in the book Long Island Oddities by John and Laura Leita, is a great example of the fully formed urban legend. And their account cites a teen couple who parked at the side of the road near the bridge. The boy left the car to relieve himself in the woods, but he never returned. The girl, terrified, instead of going out to investigate, locked herself in the car and spent the night, eventually falling asleep. When she awoke in the morning and got out of the car by daylight, she found her boyfriend's body hanging from the overpass. So some pretty grim stories on Sweet Hollow Road, a lot of death, a lot of sadness. It's a dark road if you've ever gone down it at night. It definitely has that creepy vibe. And I think one person I know who has gone down that road to test out some of these myths is Trevor.
Yes, I went down that road. It was with me and two of my friends. One of them was a New York City police officer, and we went down this road. We tried everything. We tried to turn off the car, turn off the headlights, put it in neutral. Didn't really get far with that, but for some reason, one of us got the bright idea to step out of the car and take a walk. And brilliant, right? Because there's no way that could end badly. And as we were walking, we heard a distinctly feminine sound, something I could equate to a moan. It was a, oh, like that. And it was the creepiest thing. And I turned and I saw my NYPD officer friend, and his face is just pale white and his eyes are wild. He's like, yeah, I heard it too. And after that, we're like, you know what? Let's get in the car. We're done. We're good. We saw what we came to see. So
unfortunately, you only have to drive a short distance to return to bright lights and civilization.
Yes.
All right. Well, those are our accounts from Sweet Hollow Road. And we're going to move to another part of the island for our next set of stories. And we're heading south for the Amityville Horror.
The Amityville Horror. This concerns murders, hauntings, demonic possession, and I'm not sure we can talk about Long Island myths and legends without discussing the Amityville Horror. So in November of 1974, 23-year-old Ronnie DeFeo walked into Henry's bar, placed a gun on the counter, and said, "Someone just shot my mother and father." Now, some reports say he acted frantic and frazzled, and others say he was eerily calm, even adding, "I need a drink," after that statement. But the police were called, and when they arrived at the house, they found Ronnie's mother, father, and his two brothers and his two sisters all dead in their beds. Now, this is a heartbreaking story on its own, but here's where it gets a little interesting. The victims, which showed no signs of struggle, all died of gunshot wounds. The gunshots somehow did not wake the family as Ronnie moved from room to room. Weirder still, when police spoke to the neighbors who claimed to be awake during the incident, they reported hearing nothing. No gunshots, no suspicious noises. Now, Ronnie's story changed multiple times throughout the trial, but he did report that he heard voices telling him to do this, and he believes he acted out of self-defense. It is worth noting, however, that Ronnie was a known drug user and suffered from multiple personality disorder. But a little more than a year later, George and Kathleen Lutz purchased the DeFeo house, believing it to be their dream house. Now, just 4 weeks after, the Lutz family, including their children, fled the house in the middle of the night. They claimed something was there. The walls oozed blood. They'd hear strange voices at night. An invisible marching band would move throughout the house. And the daughter even said that she saw a pig, a demonic pig who she nicknamed Jody. Now, in 1976, the Lutz family brought famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, who you might know from the Conjuring movies. They brought them in to investigate the house. Now, while they were there, they snapped this photo here, and it shows a ghostly young boy by the stairs that they believe to be the ghost of one of Ronnie DeFeo's brothers. Creepy, right? Now, what the Lutzes experienced in that house became national news, and it was the subject of best-selling books, Hollywood films. It became a cultural phenomenon. And since then, the Amityville Horror House has been bought and sold many times, as recently as 2017. I know because I really wanted to buy it. There were no reports of any further hauntings from any of the future homeowners. Now, over the years, the Lutz family has changed their story multiple times, including that some of the events in Jay Anson's famous book were fabricated. However, they were still insistent that something was indeed haunting the house. And as for their children, the Lutz children have mostly stayed away from the spotlight. But in 2003, their oldest son, Daniel, appeared in a documentary. He spoke about the haunting and stands by his father's story. He said most of what was reported did indeed happen.
Very creepy stuff, Trevor. And I'll just a personal anecdote to the Amityville horror story. A writer friend of mine wrote a blog post some years back about coming across the house while there was a yard sale going on, and somehow managing to purchase an original light fixture. So, circa 1970s light fixture that was blue glass in the shape of grapes. And she thought it would be cool to have a souvenir from the house. But when she got it back to her home and tried to install it, it shocked her husband, even though the electricity was off. And that night they heard strange footsteps going through their house. And so the next morning, the lamp was, as far as I know, boxed up, put away, and forgotten. So,
Wow.
but I think, oh, go ahead, Jessica. Did you have something?
No, I just wanted to, I don't want to interject too much. I want you all to keep going, but that's actually something I had not heard. I know that in the past, people who have purchased that house have been genuinely a little bit private about it, but I have a book from the Delmarva Peninsula called Possessed Possessions, and that story sounds like it would have fit very well in there.
Definitely. Yeah, and it is interesting. I think the people who've lived in the house ever since have all been very sensitive to people driving by and kind of looking and wanting to explore. But I realized that in my haste to get away from the terrifying events of Sweet Hollow Road, we didn't pause to take any questions about that topic. So now that we're ready to take a question or two about Amityville Horror, we could also take a question or two about Sweet Hollow Road if anyone has one they'd like to ask.
Like I said, just put it in the chat or the Q&A, and we will address it.
The buttons are on the bottom of the screen.
In the meantime, but I don't know. Are we going? I'm trying to remember if we're going towards Mount Misery because I have a Mount Misery question and I know some
Do
people.
you? I was like, I actually have been to Sweet Hollow Road, which is why it's my background, and it is so creepy at night, and the people do drive really, really fast. I've been there twice. And the first time I was terrified to try to do that car thing of putting it under the overpass that I made my friend drive my car under it. And our car moved a little, but is because of the road, not because of, I don't think it was because of anything supernatural, but it's very creepy there. And anytime I drive past, I always get like the chills.
Definitely has a weird, isolated vibe, that road.
And did you decide to get out of the car and take a walk?
That was the second time I went with different friends that were like, come on, it's going to be fine. And we parked, so if you're going from Jericho Turnpike, we parked like, I was like, if you could see in my lovely photo, like on one of the sides of the overpass, there was kind of like a side road, and then we walked across because we were really smart. And then walked like beyond, like along the overpass, and we came across this, like, I don't know what it was, but I was like, is this like a church or something like that? I don't know if it was someone's house or something, but it was just weird. And then we walked, there was like, I guess like a nature area that we walked around, and I was just freaking out the entire time of like, let's just go back, let's just go to like Dunkin' Donuts or something, like I'm freaking myself out where I thought I saw like a man crouched down. It was a tree stump.
We do have some audience questions as well.
Yes.
Sorry, if you want to finish up with that, and then we'll get to some of the audience questions.
Oh no, my story's done of just, I don't take me anywhere that has the supernatural background. I'll freak everyone out.
Somebody in the Q&A would like to know, and this is a fabulous question. Do you find that a lot of legends have basis in actual fact, like Amityville has the verifiable murders and medical history, or are they mostly random and unconfirmable?
I think in the case of urban legends, I find that they have basis in reality, but not necessarily fact, if that makes sense. There's stories that could happen, at least up to the supernatural element, perhaps. But a lot of them, it's really difficult to trace back to any verifiable fact. Even Amityville, the haunting is what most people know. And I know growing up, I knew, as a kid on Long Island, I knew all about the Amityville horror. It was this thing over, on Long Island. It was this haunted house. It was real. It was terrifying. It wasn't until much later that I learned about the DeFeo murders. And, that's the real horror of that story. But it was really overshadowed by the haunting story. And so whether the haunting is based in fact, or there's a lot of discussion about that it was a hoax or whatever, what really caused it. It's urban legends in general seem to elude that concrete connection to some event that we can document.
Well said.
Thank you. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and we have a question in the chat, and I'm going to let Stacy take that one.
Okay, we have a question from Stephanie saying, do you know the history of Sleepy Hollow Road? What was it before it was a paved road?
That's a great question. I don't actually know specifically what it was before it was a paved road. It's part of that Mount Misery area. And that was, we're going to get into that a little bit in the next segment. I would imagine that at one point it was a trail of some kind and started out as, not a paved road, but just a path, a relatively level path through that area, which is quite hilly. And other than that, I can't say for sure.
Thank you very much. All right, I guess we can move on.
All right. Well, we're back in Melville for Mount Misery, where we're going to encounter UFOs, Men in Black, and Mary's Grave. And one of the interesting things about Mount Misery is it contains the highest point on Long Island, Jane's Hill. And it forms sort of one edge of what is considered the most haunted or most paranormal place on Long Island. One side of it, Sweet Hollow Road, forms the other side of it. They're connected by Old Country Road. And to the north, they are bound for the most part by Jericho Turnpike and woods and other things that are in there. But Mount Misery has quite a history. So Jane's Hill is the highest point on Long Island, roughly 400 feet above sea level. And just Jessica and I was telling us earlier before we started about someone who couldn't believe there was actually a road on Long Island called Mount Misery. So here's our proof. And the height in the area is mentioned often in connection with the legends. What exactly the connection is, I don't know, except perhaps that it's easier for UFOs to reach the higher ground. I don't know. We're just joking with that, but it's the site of a lot of different phenomenon. So there have been UFO sightings there going back to the 60s. Legends say Native Americans in the area considered it sort of a taboo location. There have been reports of men in black visits, and we'll get into exactly what those are shortly. And there are incidents of lost time, which are common to UFO encounters and factor into one of the stories in particular that relates to Mount Misery. So one of the earliest reports about UFO sightings and activity at Mount Misery came in the book, The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel. And it's a famous book about the paranormal. There was a movie made based on the book some years ago. I think Richard Gere played John Keel. Most of that story has to do with West Virginia and the Point Pleasant experiences in the Silver Bridge collapse. But there's a segment on Long Island, which is pretty fascinating. And men in black are strange visitors, often in black suits and hats, thus their name. They often drive black cars. Everything about them seems slightly off. Their clothes don't quite fit. Their sleeves might be too short, or they might be made of some kind of strange material. Their cars are impossibly shiny or quiet. They don't quite match any known vehicle models. They sometimes seem to appear out of nowhere and vanish the same way. Men in black often speak in a sort of stilted language or show odd reactions, such as inappropriate laughter. And they ask a lot of strange, odd questions, in particular, sometimes about people's experiences with UFOs or other paranormal phenomena, or frighteningly about children. And their behavior seems strange. They seem to have a weird sense of time. Their appearance can vary from pale to almost sunburned to olive complected, and their features are sometimes described as sort of diabolical. Where they factor in on Mount Misery is that in the 1960s, a group of men in black appeared at a house on Mount Misery Road. This was 1967. And the homeowner, reported to be an elderly woman, noted that they had no car. There was no car in sight, which meant that they must have walked. And then she allowed them into her house. And yet their shoes appeared perfectly shined and clean. They left no tracks, despite the fact that it had recently rained and they had to approach the house via a muddy hill. Later the same week, another house was approached, this time by a white-haired woman with a clipboard, posing as a newspaper reporter, probing the owner with personal questions. And when that was, when John Keel wrote about that in the Mothman Prophecies, he attempted to verify the woman's association with the newspaper and couldn't link such a person to any local newspaper. Where things got really interesting with UFOs on Mount Misery in the 60s actually involves local radio station WBAB. And a on-air personality, Jay Parrow there, began gathering and talking about these stories on the air. leading to more reports coming in, and then people driving around the neighborhood or traveling to the neighborhood hoping to see something weird. And she eventually interviewed a woman who experienced the lost time incident on Mount Misery Road. She and her boyfriend were driving when they encountered a strange light. The next thing they knew, they were no longer on Mount Misery Road. They were abruptly on Old Country Road, and the time in between was missing. This supposedly sparked a series of contacts between that woman and mysterious otherworldly figures who delivered messages to her and directed her behavior. They had her meet their representatives at local libraries to read weird books. They gave her things to mail to people. And ultimately, they gave her a warning about soon to occur troubles in the Middle East and an assassination attempt against the Pope. And whether or not those prophecies were true is open to interpretation. But to this day, this has been a location where people have reported strange lights, occasionally UFOs, and other weird phenomenon. And like Sweet Hollow Road, if you do drive down Mount Misery Road, it does have a strange sense of isolation. It's a very dark road. It's heavily wooded. And you do feel like you're kind of leaving the civilized world for a little bit. Of course, there are very nice houses there now, and it's a lot different today than I'm sure than it was in the 60s, I'm sure. But it hasn't, the modern world hasn't completely erased that weird, shadowy feeling. Of course, not only UFO phenomena are connected to Mount Misery Road, we also have supernatural phenomena. Mary's grave is an urban legend with many versions. And it is said to actually be located in multiple places on Long Island. Where the real Mary's grave exists, who can say? In some versions of the story, Mary is a victim. In others, she's a villain. When Mary is the victim, she died tragically, perhaps murdered by her father over an unwanted pregnancy, or in a fire that she accidentally set, burning a hospital to the ground. Although, as far as I know, there's no documentation of any kind of hospital or sanitarium that's associated with that version of the legend in that area. In others, she's the villain who may have killed her children and herself as revenge against an unfaithful husband, or for some other reason, perhaps she was insane. But in all of them, Mary still wanders the cemetery. She can sometimes be seen there or heard sobbing at night. And in many versions of the legend, if you flash a light on Mary's grave, if you can find it, and then turn it off at night, her face will appear in the tombstone. So there are reports of a Mary's grave in Huntington, Head of Harbor, Melville, Stony Brook, Mount Sinai, and other places. Huntington's historic ceremony is right on Mount Misery Road. There's not much of it left. It's very overgrown. I didn't venture in very far, just enough to sort of get a sense that this was some wild land carved out of the road and the residential areas. But one of the most popular locations for Mary's grave is Head of Harbor, where there is the ruins of an old shack, stone shack that had burned down and fallen into disrepair right by the side of the road.
Now, I'm curious, James, can I ask something?
Sure.
Do you think, because while you were talking, it reminded me a lot of like the Bloody Mary myth. Like, do you think there's any connection between Mary's grave and Bloody Mary?
That's a good question. Probably not directly, but there's a certain similarity there in terms of you can do a certain act and summon the ghost, whether you stand in front of a mirror and say Bloody Mary 5 times, or you flash your light on the grave marker to see the ghost. There's that same sort of principle at work. What happens when Mary's ghost appears in her gravestone? I have no idea. I'm assuming that, anybody who's actually done this and succeeded has probably just run away in terror and not stuck around to find out what the ghost wants. Which, that could be really disappointing to Mary's ghost if she just wants to kind of, chat with somebody or something. Um,
Yeah.
But Mary is it's a common name for urban legends, and the Bloody Mary legend is spread far and wide. And I've heard of a version of the Mary's Grave legend that is based in Connecticut. So certainly it is spread at least across the Long Island Sound.
Mm.
That is extremely interesting.
Cool. All right. If there are any questions about Mount Misery, we'll be happy to answer those, or we can move on to our next location.
I actually have a question, and I don't want to step on anything with the audience, but I don't know how true this is. So I had heard that there was a hospital that burned down in the area. Is that true, or is that myth?
I don't know the answer to that. I have to say, I'm sorry. I've heard that same legend, and it's connected in some degree to the Mary's Grave legend, that Mary was in that hospital and accidentally set her bed on fire, and then died in the fire, and everyone in the hospital died with her. I have not seen any documentation of a hospital in that area, so it could be that that occurred somewhere away from Mount Misery. That might be one of the other locations, perhaps.
We have a question in the chat. Oh, okay, we have two. They're all coming in now. Okay, Stacy, you want to grab these?
Yeah, we have a question from Lily saying, are there hiking trails around Mount Misery? And
I don't
Yes.
think, not right around Mount Misery, but there are hiking trails. There's a nature preserve over off Sweet Hollow Road that's in the same general area.
and then we have a question from Rick saying that they thought it was an orphanage that burned down.
Yes, I've heard that version too.
I've heard it was like a secret military hospital.
Ooh, I didn't hear that one.
That's cool. I haven't heard that one.
That's like, I just looked it up now.
Oh, nice. All right.
Because I was looking to see where Head of Harbor is. Because I was like, where is that on Long Island?
Yeah, that's one of the fun things about urban legends, is there are so many variations, and they sort of exist with a life of their own over time, with people adding and changing them without losing the basic story. And so you get all these really cool different versions of this. It's the same tale.
Yeah, it is interesting. And of course, I've also heard, now that I'm thinking about it, that it was a mental institution, of which Long Island has several in its history.
Yes. And many of which are rumored to be haunted.
Very nice. Are there any other audience questions or comments? If not, we can move on. And if you have any that you think of, please hold on to them, because we'll have some Q&A time at the end.
All right.
So we've arrived to the Lady of Lake Ronkonkoma, and this involves Native American ghosts, drownings, and just all around creepiness. Now, a few things we need to know about Lake Ronkonkoma. First, it is both the largest and deepest lake on Long Island. It spans over 243 acres, and it's also about 70 feet deep. It also has very murky water, which prevents people from seeing more than like 10 feet down. Native Americans considered this lake to be bottomless, not only because it was hard to see through the water, but the bodies that drowned there disappeared and never really returned back to the surface. This lake claims the life of about one person each year on average. That statistic is pretty strange to think about, but what's stranger is that almost every single person that has drowned in this lake has been a young adult male. So the story goes that in the 1600s, a young Native American princess fell in love with an English settler. The names of the princess varies. Some call her Princess Ronkonkoma, others reports call her Princess Tuscawanta, and in other variations of the myth, she has just totally different names. But her father forbade her from seeing this young settler, but she went out, snuck out every night to meet him. And one night, this young man did not appear. The following night, he also did not appear. And this went on for a time before the young princess, heartbroken, threw herself into the murky water where she drowned. Angered because of the unrequited love, Our Lady Princess lures young men to their deaths, particularly those she finds attractive. Now, what I find most compelling about this myth is the evidence that seems to back it up. From the late 1800s to the late 1990s, 1990s, there have been over 160 reported drownings. And out of all of those victims, only 3 have been reported to be women. The last person believed to have drowned in Lake Ronkonkoma was in 2017. And since then, the lake has been declared off limits to swimmers. Suffolk County cites algae bloom as the reason why it's off limits.
Are you sure it's algae bloom and not trying to protect people from the ghost?
Listen, I'm no expert in algae, but from 2017 to now seems like a long time to let that algae bloom. So it was probably smart of them to shut off the swimming in the lake.
Well, there's another name I've heard associated with that legend, Princess. I'm not sure the pronunciation exactly, but Princess Wunanit, who was betrothed to Chief Wyandanch, and that's a name familiar to Long Islanders.
Wyandanch?
Wyandanch, yeah. Thank you. And that version involves sacrifices to the lake. That part of the thinking was that when someone drowned, their body wouldn't reappear in Lake Ronkonkoma, but would appear in another body of water, suggesting that maybe there was an idea that there was some underground connection between Lake Ronkonkoma and perhaps the Great South Bay or something. And that when that occurred, the Native Americans in the area had to make a sacrifice to the lake of their most beautiful maiden in order to appease the gods. And that this was part of what led to the mythology of drowning around Lake Ronkonkoma.
So you're saying that the princess of Lake Ronkonkoma was a victim of sacrifice?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one iteration I've encountered.
I mean, either way, those statistics are still scary when you take into account how many actual reports of young adult male drownings happened in that lake. It's horrifying.
Yeah, the numbers definitely seem a little bit off balance, but then on the other hand, I guess, young men are the ones most likely to be reckless.
Do they allow canoeing, or it's just like 100% stay away from Lake Ronkonkoma?
No, they allow canoeing. They allow boats as long as there's no gas-powered motors. They do allow electric motors, and they do allow fishing, but no actual person in water swimming.
Interesting.
And that's currently in effect today, that restriction?
I haven't called Suffolk County to confirm, but everything I read about it, even today, says, yeah, no swimming allowed in Lake Ronkonkoma.
Okay. All right.
So do we have any questions on Our Lady of the Lake?
We have a comment in the chat. When the beaches suffer algae blooms, it is only temporarily closed and can reopen after a day. So interesting.
Oh, well, I think Suffolk County has some splaining to do.
Yeah, or we need to double check that fact.
Has anybody else have any comments? Maybe they have you heard the same versions of the story? Has it been changed? I have to say, like, the classic version sounds like, it sounds like a Pocahontas type story, like but it's very interesting that you do hear so many drownings in this particular lake, and that the story, continues to endure.
Yeah, it's a popular legend. All
Yeah,
right.
from what I heard, like all the locals, they agree with it. They don't allow their children to go swimming in there. They don't allow anything. The locals seem to take it very seriously. So found that interesting.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next area, the Montauk Project. Camp Hero and Montauk. And the legends around this involve Camp Hero, a military base, now a state park, psychic experiments, and the Montauk Monster. So starting with Camp Hero, this is currently a state park at the very, very end of the South Fork, all the way out in Montauk. It's an absolutely beautiful place to go hiking, or go to the beach. And it was commissioned as a military base in 1942, although military activities there date back to the Revolutionary War, when the location and to other conflicts, when the location was used for training and other purposes. But the 1942 base was built to be camouflaged as a fishing village. And so buildings were structured to look like ordinary things, a church, a theater, houses, a town hall, but really inside they were different. So the church might have been the gymnasium for the soldiers stationed there. The town hall might have been the dining hall for the soldiers. And they built up gun emplacements, artillery emplacements, and bunkers, then covered them with earth and grew grass and trees on them to even further disguise them. It was decommissioned by the mid 80s and eventually became a state park. And if you go there now, you can see all of these buildings. They remain. You can see the sealed off bunkers built into the earth. And it's really kind of a cool place to hike and to go exploring. Perhaps most famous is the radio antenna, which remains at the center of Camp Hero. This is a really striking piece of construction that has just been left to rot. If you see it now, it's in obvious disrepair, and it's still quite an eerie reminder of what was there and what purposes the base served, which initially was to defend against an attack from the sea, and later to be part of an early alert system for attacks coming in. And when technology outstripped what the base could offer, that was when it was finally put out of activity. Or was it put out of activity? Well, there were a lot of conspiracy theories about what went on at Camp Hero, particularly what went on under Camp Hero. There's a very famous story about the Montauk Project. And this was put forth initially by some Long Island paranormal and UFO investigators, psychic investigators, Preston Nichols, Stuart Swerdlow, and Peter Moon. They wrote several books about this, and they claimed that the government actually conducted experiments in these tunnels and underground facilities in psychic powers, in time travel, in opening gateways to other dimensions. There's even a rumor that one of the subjects psychically created a Bigfoot-like creature, brought it into existence just with the power of his or her mind, and that it still haunts the area. The most chilling aspect of this is the element of the conspiracy that claims children were abducted for these experiments. And there has been very little documentation to prove that. While the US government and military certainly acknowledge the base's history, they refute any of the conspiratorial elements, even noting that military bases of this kind were typically not built with tunnels. But there are reports of people who have gone exploring and have found some underground accesses and tunnels. People who have gone into the buildings. I have personally not gone into the buildings. I'm a little bit chicken when it comes to that. I'm happy to go exploring in the parks and walk around and check out these old buildings from the outside and take some pictures, but I'm afraid to go in because I take this sign at its word. keep out falling objects. I'm afraid that one of those falling objects might be me going through a floor or something like that. But the Montauk Boys is what some of the people who claim to have been part of this secret experimental program call themselves. And there is a connection to another urban legend or paranormal story about the Philadelphia experiment. And that suggests that progress made and scientific breakthroughs made in Camp Hero were part of what drove the military to attempt to make an aircraft carrier invisible in Philadelphia, resulting in an experiment perhaps more successful than they planned. Is said not to have made the carrier only invisible, but to actually have shifted it through time and back. And of course, that's not Long Island, so we're not going to spend too much time on the Philadelphia experiment. There's plenty out there if you're interested. But the Montauk Project itself, Camp Hero, has gained some serious stature in pop culture. It's one of the inspirations for the hit series Stranger Things. And even the radar antenna itself seems to have something to say. Supposedly, it has occasionally turned itself on. There are reports from 2011 and around 2014 of the antenna coming on and moving. As far as I can tell, it's always been in the same position. So who knows what happened or why it turned itself on or what might have powered it. Now, often the Montauk Monster is conflated with the Montauk Project, but the Montauk Monster is really something different. This is a fairly new urban legend as far as urban legends go. And this is about a carcass that washed up at Ditch Plains Beach, which is just a short distance down the shore from Camp Hero out in Montauk. This was in the summer in 2008, and some beachgoers encountered this hideous thing and took pictures of it, and it got around. And somehow a writer at Gawker.com picked it up and ran this. And it must have been a slow news day, because the next thing anyone knew, the Montauk Monster went viral and was all over the internet. And since then, there have been reports of similar Montauk monsters, similar carcasses washing up in places as far as Asia and as close as Staten Island. Now, a lot of people dismiss the Montauk Monster as simply the distorted remains of some common animal, a raccoon or a small dog or something else that was decomposed and distorted by being in the water for so long. But looking at the picture, you can really see that there is a fearsome sort of prehistoric appearance to the remains. So it's certainly not surprising that it sparked legends.
Now, can I ask a question?
Please do.
Do you, because I know like right off the coast of Montauk, there's Plum Island. And I know that at Plum Island, they do a lot of like testing and a lot of diseases and stuff. Do you think this could have anything to do with that?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I probably need top secret clearance to answer that for real. But yeah, Plum Island, Anthrax Island experiments were going on there. Perhaps experiments that nobody really knows about that created some sort of mutant anthrax resistant beast that washed up across the shore. I don't know.
And the other question I have is, do you know what happened to the body, to the carcass of the creature?
As far as I can tell, and I actually have researched the Montauk Monster a bit just recently. It was part of the novella I wrote, Devil in the Green, talks about the Montauk Monster. And so I did some digging. And as far as I can tell, the remains were removed. The most plausible story I encountered seemed to be that they were removed by a local resident, not a summer visitor or summer resident, but a year-round Montauk resident, in a shoebox and taken away and perhaps stashed in somebody's garage or basement and forgotten, or maybe disposed of.
See, I heard a story where, Men in Black showed up on the beach and quickly loaded the carcass into their van and then drove off into the distance, never to be seen again. I feel like your story might hold a little bit more weight.
Oh, well, like the mysterious clowns, you never quite know where the men in black are going to show up.
We have a question. How
Yes.
big is it? That was actually my question as well.
Same.
It was, it's hard to tell from the picture because there's nothing really there for scale. But if you look very closely at its shoulder, you can see a fly sitting on its spine. And that gives you a sense that it was not big. It was actually on the small side. So a raccoon or a possum or a small dog is probably a good approximation of the size.
Yeah, that's actually very
Yeah.
interesting.
I didn't even notice the fly at first. I'm just like looking at it because I remember seeing when it first like came about. And I was like, what is this thing?
Yeah.
But looking at it, I think it's like, the size of like a bit like mastiff or something like that. But
Yeah,
the fly gives.
I think the ferocious appearance of its face makes you think, oh, it's bigger.
Yeah.
And then there was a more recent sighting at Ditch Plains Beach last summer, summer 2020. A similar picture was taken and posted online.
Oh my gosh.
So whatever the Montauk monster
Really?
is,
That
it
I
hasn't
didn't
gone away.
know.
Me neither.
That's cool.
And it looks like it has a beak.
Yeah, I was trying to
Nice.
figure out what that is there.
So weird.
A beak and some seriously gnarly teeth.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have one more stop on our primary tour here. So let's come back to the Mid-Island.
We got the Long Island Devil. This is a haunted cemetery, demonic entity. This is a myth that I feel just really doesn't get as much love as it deserves. It takes place in the Farmingdale, in a Farmingdale cemetery. It's called the Bethpage Quaker Burial Ground, but it is located in Farmingdale. It was established in 1698, and it's one of 3 adjacent graveyards. Now, the main difference between burial grounds and graveyards is that burial grounds don't always have their graves marked. Quakers in particular didn't agree with large ornate headstones, believing that a large headstone was a display of wealth. So most Quaker headstones are small, absent of any epitaphs, and may not even be marked at all. So some people report seeing an impossibly tall man wandering through these burial grounds. He's dressed in black and is typically seen at night. He walks with his head down, searching the ground. The story goes that this man is the ghost of a Quaker whose daughter died of illness. While the man was away from home traveling, they buried his daughter in an unmarked grave. So now he spends eternity wandering the burial grounds, searching for the grave where his daughter rests so he can finally say goodbye. Some locals even claim to hear him weeping as he moves between the graves. When approached, people say the man backs into the forest of trees surrounding the burial grounds and disappears. Now, this, on a more personal note, this myth is very near to me. Back in 2008, right after Hurricane Sandy, myself, along with other members of the Farmingdale Rotary Club, volunteered to help clear the debris from this burial ground. And while we were there, I formed a pretty good relationship with the caretaker, and he told me all of these stories firsthand. And he can confirm that there is something walking through the burial grounds at night.
Wow.
Now this one was completely new to me, so all credit to Trevor for bringing that to our list.
Not much is written about it, but there is some stuff out there, and it's really a local thing. I grew up not far from it, so it is something that I heard a lot of the school children talk about, and a lot of the locals talk about it all the time. So it is pretty cool.
We have a comment in the Q&A from Allison that there are so many hidden graveyards on Long Island.
There are.
It's very true. Yeah, just going out to take some pictures in the Mount Misery, Sweet Hollow Road area, I found 3 just in that area, the Melville
Wow.
Cemetery, the Huntington Historical Cemetery, and then there's one, I wish I had had more time and could park safely, but there's just a sign. It's a small sign on the top of a tall pole for Ketchum Graveyard. And it's just a dirt trail into the woods. And if there's ever been a spookier setup for something paranormal, I can't think of it.
Oh, wow.
But they're all over the place. There's a Home Depot in Comac. I think it's on Jericho Turnpike, and in the middle of the parking lot is an old cemetery. They just built
Wait,
around it. It's fenced in.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I live in Comac. I need to go, gonna go to Home Depot right after this. Just go look around.
you can't miss it. It's right there.
Yeah, it's so weird. They just built around it, fenced it in, and
That's so weird because I've been there so many times.
I didn't know that.
That's so weird. But I know they're usually hidden because I remember years ago before I bought the house I live in now that there was this really pretty Victorian Smithtown. And right next door is a cemetery. And I was like, that's really cool. Like maybe not a cemetery, but a graveyard. It looked like the photo of what you have on the slide kind of like reminds me of it because maybe it was like a Quaker burial ground because they weren't really marked or anything. But there's also a small graveyard, something near my house now by it's near the Comac, not near the Comac High School, but where the Comac High School is, that street, Scholar. So, and I think it's like not Townline. I'm trying to think of what the road is near my house. But it's creepy to see them because they just kind of pop out of nowhere.
Yeah, I live right on right by Route 109, and the thing is that there's gas stations, fast food places, little tiny stores, small graveyard, another gas station, little tiny stores, another small graveyard. So it's really weird how they just kind of appear, and they're also they've kind of like blend in, like they're always there. You just don't notice them until you look for them. But one last quick thing I want to say about this story is that this photo here I took, and there was a small driveway which I pulled my car in to grab a photo of it. And when I went to go back out, my rear view camera kept going off, telling me that something was there. And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. And there was absolutely nothing there, but it kept on giving me the buzzer. And listen, if it's a ghost, I don't want to run it over. So I just kind of drove around. But yeah, I found that to be a little weird. Could it be, Ford's internal computer acting up, or a ghost?
There is a cemetery, and I know I've mentioned this to Stacy several times, near the library, actually, but not near, but near enough. In Woodbury, on Woodbury Road, there is like a little hiking trail. I don't know how many people are familiar with it's like a white chapel on Jericho Turnpike, a historic chapel. But there's a graveyard there, but that's not what I'm talking about. If you hike up the trail, which is adjacent to that, like you cross over Jericho Turnpike and it's parallel to Woodbury Road, you keep on going up and there is an old graveyard, and I believe some Eagle Scouts did something with the graveyard at one point. But I don't know if the gravestones are readable anymore, but the epitaphs on the gravestones are crazy because they are of that time where, you talk about the Quakers supposedly not wanting that. These gravestones, like in vivid description, would say so-and-so died after a long illness and didn't complain, et cetera, et cetera. And there was one where it was like, so-and-so died, like the way that it was described was like, he did not go softly into the wind. He complained. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember my husband and I hiking up there at one point and being like, is this even real that I'm reading? So that one is extremely interesting. If anybody has been up there, please let me know. I forget whose graveyard it is, but at some point I need to get back there.
That sounds really cool.
It was very, very cool. And like I said, I mean, it's right around the corner. And I'm not really sure whether or not you could read the gravestones anymore because they were kind of fading. And this was back in, like, the last time I was up there was probably like 2008, 2009. But it's still a really cool graveyard to go to if you are in the urban exploring, or I guess in that case, it's not quite urban, graveyard exploring of that mine.
Yeah, that sounds like it's worth a visit. But we got a couple of comments I see in the chat about 2 or 3 Revolutionary War era cemeteries in Oyster Bay, which is really cool. And someone commented that cemeteries have their own strong energy. And I think that's true. I think, we look at these cemeteries squeezed in, but, like Trevor was saying, it's right there. I can think of one on Hempstead Turnpike that's between Sport Time and a strip mall. And my daughter used to play volleyball there. And so we'd have to park. If it was overflow, you'd have to park next door in the strip mall. Then you'd have to walk past the cemetery. And it's always like, it's like you step into a quieter area almost. There's like a certain peaceful energy associated with those locations. Even if, walking another 10 feet, you're back in the hustle and bustle of things.
Yeah, someone mentioned in the chat the 2 or 3 Revolutionary War cemeteries in Oyster Bay. I think, like, the names are, when you look at the records, and I believe a few years ago there was a miniseries called Turn, which was about the Revolutionary War, and the family members of some of the people. I think the family names are in those cemeteries. So very cool.
All right. Well, that is our last major stop on the Weird Long Island tour. But we found so much to talk about and look at in Long Island paranormal history and urban legends that Trevor and I put together a sort of last blast, a couple of more that, for anyone who's interested, you can certainly look these up. We'll give you the quick nutshell version of these, and then we'll take some questions. The first one up, the South Haven UFO crash. This was in November of 1992. A UFO was sighted over the South Shore, a cigar-shaped UFO, and it crashed in the woods in the park there. Reportedly, an escape pod landed, fled the crashing vehicle and landed in the woods. The crash sparked forest fires, and the Brookhaven lab sent out firefighters trained to deal with radioactive fires, and government officials responded. And the wreckage of the UFO, the escape pod, and apparently, or so it is said, the surviving extraterrestrials were all trucked away quickly to Brookhaven and covered up by the government.
That brings us to the Fire Island Lighthouse ghosts. Now, there is no shortage of lighthouses on Long Island and no shortage of haunted lighthouses on Long Island. But this one in particular, it was built in 1826, and there have been so many reports of lighthouse keepers descending into madness. People report hearing footsteps on the stairs and a maniacal laughter coming from the lighthouse. So I find that to be incredibly creepy, how many reports throughout the years have been on that Fire Island lighthouse.
Lighthouses seem to be a magnet for ghosts.
Something about them.
Yeah, maybe like cemeteries, they have a particular energy to them. The Satan House. So this is in Massapequa, and I remember this place from when I was growing up and lived in that area, and encountering it purely by chance, going by it one day and thinking, holy cow, what the heck is that? But it's an anachronistic house with towers and turrets, Gothic windows, a black rail fence. It's painted red and black. Rumors say that the drapes are made from coffin liners, a horse-drawn carriage sits parked in the backyard, and if the number of candles in the windows equals the number of passengers in your car, you can count on bad luck. In reality, it's merely the odd taste of an eccentric elderly couple who owns the house, and its appearance has nothing to do with Satan or the devil. It's merely their quirky tastes and sense of style.
I gotta say that's my goal. That's my life goal, is to live in a house like that and call it quirky. And then we go into the Satanic Panic. Now, this isn't actually a location, as it was just kind of a brief time period on Long Island. It took place in the 80s, where people were crazy concerned about religious horror, including Satanism. And in particular, there are two stories that two stories. One of them revolved around an exorcism that took place during a church service, in Sayville. And there's another incident where a satanic cult was linked to a teen murder in Northport in the 1980s. Now, the more you read about Satanic Panic, the more you find a lot of other odd little incidences all adding up.
And a lot of that had to do with the sort of repressed memories issue that occurred in the 80s, where people were recovering memories from supposed abuse as children by satanic cults, and a lot of that has since been debunked. The exorcism, Trevor and I could not ascertain whether that happened or not, or what the details were. The Northport area satanic cult was really just in response to a few people who sort of really went over to the dark side. But the evidence of any actual cults never materialized.
Stacy, you want to take this one?
Yeah, we have a fun little story from Cameron. Their driver's ed teacher used to take their car to the Satan house as a destination for early morning driving practice. And they say that there's a weird, like, cage covered patio in the back too.
Yeah, yes, Syosset High School, where I went, that was actually a destination that we did for driver's ed. And
What?
yeah, and as far as that and a few of the dangerous roads in the Glen Cove area, but you
We
know,
didn't have that at Jericho.
but the thing about, yeah, there is an interesting looking patio in the back. You can't really see it though. And the thing about that house, and like I guess, you know, as James was saying, it is the tastes of the people who built it. The house literally sits in the middle of the most run-of-the-mill suburban street. And you know, they built it up to look like that, and it gets a lot of attention. And from what I understand, on Halloween they kind of block it off because it gets a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But you know, when you do drive by it, you can't not look at it and be like, whoa.
I've always wanted to see it because my husband grew up in Massapequa. So I'm like, have you heard of this house? Because when growing up learning about the Amityville horror, he's like, yeah, they had this weird house. And I was like, let's drive past it. He's like, I'm not doing that. I don't care. So if anyone wants to road trip with me, so I could finally see this house.
It will we'll stop at Sweet Hollow Road and then head over to the Satan house. And I just have to say, best driver's ed teachers ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Let's go to the Satan house. Yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments? I actually have one myself, but I'm curious, or any other legends people just want to drop in the chat or the Q&A.
Yeah, let us know.
Stephanie, we have something. You want me to grab this one, Stacy?
Yeah.
This is a bit out there, but a friend of mine says that in peninsulas like Long Island, energy gets stuck, like cul-de-sac, you can't pass through it. The energy gets trapped and weird things happen. Have you ever heard of this before? What do you think? Is it common for islands to have weird stories?
Interesting question. Trevor, have you ever heard anything like that?
I haven't. I mean, I know that as we get like further out east and stuff like that, there's it's, service slows down and time seems to move slow out there. But that's really all I've heard on that sense.
Yeah, that's interesting about the island. I've never heard that specifically. But I guess it's certainly possible. Water is kind of a boundary. I mean, if you think back to folklore and superstition, vampires, for example, couldn't cross running water or moving water. So maybe in the same sense that they were trapped, energy gets trapped on the island by water. That's a really interesting idea. And
Yeah,
Laura,
also, yeah, the headless horseman also couldn't cross over the bridge, or am I
Yes.
remembering?
yeah, I guess that's kind of a factor in urban legends and supernatural lore.
But I feel
Very
like
cool.
islands in general just kind of draw this, energy about them. They, they're the source of a lot of myths, a lot of tales. It's always though there's this desolate little island off the coast, something like that. So I feel like islands in general just naturally draw those superstitions kind of. But especially with an island like Long Island, where we have such a huge history of Native American and war bases and everything like that, it's incredible.
It's
And
really
also-
cool.
And please correct me if I'm wrong, but weren't there reports of like Nazi submarines off the coast at some point? I believe I had read about that.
Mhm. Yeah, I seem to remember something about that too. I don't know the details, but I do know there were attempts to send ashore from submarines infiltrators and things like that, or at least that was believed that was happening, to kind of sneak people into the country to be saboteurs.
So, what street is the Satan house on? I'm going to say right here that I don't know if we should really be giving this out in this presentation, but
Yeah,
what I
you
will
can look
say,
it up.
what I will say is if you Google it, you will find it. But that is all I will say, of that matter. But you can, I mean, the information is out there on the island. We have something in the Q&A. I can't do all the stories justice, but check the stories of the Williams and Hewlett homes at Old Bethpage Restoration. I have heard things. Yes.
I haven't, but that's cool.
Do you
Yes.
want to all the stories justice? I mean, it could take a while if you want to type in anything or share anything, Cameron. I actually had a question and I'm curious if other people had heard of this. And I mentioned it to James in the beginning. Has anybody heard a legend about a girl buried in a glass coffin on Long Island?
Yeah, I'm hoping somebody knows more
No?
about it. It definitely rings a bell for me. For some reason, though, I think the story I've heard did not occur in Long Island. So I might be confusing it with a different legend. But it does.
Just the idea of a glass
Yeah.
coffin is fairly creepy.
Okay, I guess nobody has heard. of that
Nobody.
one.
All right. I have to at some point try to track down the person who told me about that and
Yeah,
see
I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
if they have more information, but
Like, you mean a completely glass coffin, not like the coffin with the window over the face of the corpse.
no, I
Like a
believe
Snow White coffin.
that's what they were telling me. But like I said, I mean, it was a long time ago, and I have yet to find anybody. And like I used to do all the forums like Long Island Oddities, and I have found nothing. But I'm sure that
I mean, if you look it up, just doing a quick search now, there was a girl found preserved in a coffin in San Francisco, not Long Island though.
no, that's pretty far from
Yeah.
here.
Was it like a fully glass coffin, or
Yeah.
what, did it have a window?
It looked like it had kind of a window. I'll link this
I see it.
Fox 5 article I came across. Because I can't tell if it's full glass or just like panes within it. But the girl looks like a doll. in
Yeah,
my
that's not
opinion.
haunting at all.
Yeah.
Well, here, there we go.
Okay.
Oh, that's great, Cameron. I used to work and to volunteer at Old Bethpage, and his article matches a lot of the stories the other workers have told me. And one of my husband's high school friends actually also worked at Old Bethpage and had stories. So maybe we'll connect with her and see if they fit. Yeah. But yeah, this has been super, and we just want to thank on behalf of Syosset Library, thank you to James Chambers
Seriously, thank you.
and Trevor Firetog. You are welcome to talk Long Island legends at any time.
Yeah.
This is all really cool stuff. And if people want to, we have more stuff. Two things. There we go. Those Cameron's comments. Anything else? I'm actually going to copy and paste this link and put it in the chat for those who might want it. If anybody would like to find you all, thank you so much. Learned a lot. Scared to go outside now. Well,
Me too,
Stephanie. Welcome to the world. If anybody would like to find out more about either of you or have any questions, is there a place they can look for you?
Yeah, you can find me pretty easily online at my website, jameschambersonline.com. And I'm pretty accessible on social media, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about the presentation. I'm also going to just click briefly to our final slide. If you're looking for any further reading about this, Trevor and I put together a list of some of the sources we were looking at to compile our details and double check our stories.
And one
Very
more
cool.
comment, and I forget if you said this specifically, but because I know you mentioned that Stranger Things had a Long Island contact. I have heard in good authority that originally Stranger Things was supposed to be called Montauk.
I've heard that too. Yeah, I think that's actually correct. So very interesting.
Very cool. All right. Once again, everybody, sweet dreams. Have a lovely evening. Get online and research some of these things. And we hope to hear from James and Trevor very soon. Enjoy, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for
Have a good
coming.
night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you all.